like to welcome everyone to the Somerset School Committee and Somerset Berkeley Regional Joint School Committee on this Tuesday, February 15th, 2022 at 6 o'clock. The notice have been posted. Pursuant to the open meeting law, any person may make an audio or video recording of this public meeting or may transmit the meeting to any meeting. Attendees are therefore advised that any such recordings or transmissions may be made whether perceived or unperceived by those present. We have with us this evening Channel 9, Berkeley Community Access, Channel 15, Somerset SATV. I didn't know if anybody else was recording this evening. Thank you. Roll call of members present. Mr. Machado.
Present.
Mr. Baudet. Here. Mr. Gore.
Here.
Ms. Gary.
Here.
The Chair, Mike McDonald, is here. We also have with us this evening Superintendent of Schools Jeffrey Schoonover, Director of Curriculum, Director of Special Ed Meg Ashton, also Administrative Assistant Robin McCarroll.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Down. On behalf of the Somerset Berkeley Regional School Committee, all of this meeting as well. Pursuant to open meeting law, any person may make an audio or video recording of this public meeting, may transmit this meeting to any meeting. Attendees are therefore advised that such recordings and transmissions may be made whether perceived or unperceived. So roll call, your members, Ms. Andrews.
Present.
Mr. Goff. Present. Mrs. Gagliardi.
Present.
Mr. Machado.
Present.
Mr. Pierce. Present. Ms. Vincent.
Present.
And the chair votes for checking to the vote. And the other officials as part of the
Pledge allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Before we get into this evening's agenda, I would like to say that what we're going to do, as we have new business, race covering policy, ED-CFA, we are going to hear from our superintendent. So if I hear from our superintendent, she's prepared to make a recommendation. And then what we're going to be doing is going around each school committee to make a few comments about the policy and what we think. And it is important that we open it up to the comment of those here tonight. So we value your input. We wish to hear from you after we hear from the superintendent and comments from the school committee members. Superintendent?
Thank you, Mr. McDonald. All right, you received at least one document in the folder, and it's the MASC recommended model policy for EB-CFA, the face covering policy, and it has a few changes from the policy that's currently on record. As I indicated to you previously, and as you know, Commissioner Riley last week, along with Governor Baker, decided to lift the mask mandate effective February 28th. That's the day that the current mandate is set to expire. I support the recommendation from the state to switch from a mandate to an optional policy, where we strongly recommend people to continue to wear masks, but it is not required. There are a few things. I did share some information with you with just some data showing where we are right now. And first, just to emphasize where we're heading in terms of COVID positivity as a school district, or as Somerset and Somerset Berkeley districts. Just for this calendar year, so the week of January 3rd, we had 216 total cases, positive cases in the school system. Most of those were students, a few of those were employees. That was by far the highest amount that we had in any week until then. The following week, it dropped to 122, and you can see that decrease that has happened ever since. And last week we had a total of 17 positive cases, which was one of the best weeks we've had all school year. So just as we saw last year at around this time, we saw a spike shortly after the holidays, and then a rapid decrease beginning in mid-January, and then continuing right into the spring months. We seem to be following that same pattern once again. A couple of things that are different now than even at the beginning of the school year, certainly compared to last year. We didn't have the vaccinations for our school-age children last year. So I included the current vaccination rates for those who are fully vaccinated for the 5 to 11 age group for Somerset, and the 12 to 15 and 16 to 19 age groups for Somerset and Berkeley. 12 to 15 is mostly middle school grades, but we certainly do have high school students starting at age 14. This time of the year, most freshmen would be about 15. But you can see where those numbers lie for both towns. 25% of our children in Somerset, 5 to 11, 25% are fully vaccinated. An additional 7% are partially vaccinated, so 32% are partially vaccinated, at least partially vaccinated. 12 to 15 years old, we're at 59% in Somerset, 56% in Berkeley. For those who have had at least one dose, so either partially or fully vaccinated, those numbers increased to 64% for Somerset, 62% for Berkeley. The same numbers for the 16 to 19 age group, 77% in Somerset, 68% in Berkeley are fully vaccinated. When you include those who have had at least one dose so far, it's 82% in Somerset, 71% in Berkeley. So we see that, and those numbers inch up every week, even just by 1%, but it's always moving in the right direction. Next, I did want to share with you the total number of positive cases by school this year. We've had, you can see the breakdown, I'm not going to go through all those numbers, but 872 cases total. Again, most of those are students. A small number are employees, but the vast majority are students. When you look at the 872 over the total number of students and employees that we have, which is about 100, about 28% of everyone in our school system has had COVID this year. So along between that and the higher, increasing vaccination rates, a high percentage of people in the schools have antibodies for COVID. In addition to that, we started with the Test and Stay program at the start of this calendar year. With the recent changes, close contacts, we're now shifting away from that and into the at-home testing. As of earlier today, we have 500 students who have opted in to the at-home testing program, and another 132 employees who have opted in. So that's about 20% of the total population there as well. So I guess, and lastly, in order for that contact tracing for that program to go away, we do have to commit to testing symptomatic students in school. So that Buy Next Now program that we have, which had been Test and Stay for asymptomatic close contacts, shifting now to symptomatic students. We have 1,224 students and employees who have provided consent to participate in that. So that's about 40% there as well. So between decreasing cases, increasing vaccination rates, the relatively high percentage of people who have had COVID already, increasing participation in the at-home testing program, and a relatively high percentage of people choosing to participate in the symptomatic testing, in-school testing. Those are all factors that support my recommendation that we shift to an optional mask wearing program.
So, before we go on the table, I just want to make sure, Superintendent, so the MASC face covering EDCFA, that language is what you would want to adopt?
So let me pull that policy up. So it is good to note in this policy that there are 3 restrictions where masks are still required. By federal mandate still, any school provided transportation students must wear a mask. Masks must be worn by students or staff if they are in a health office, whether, regardless, students, anyone would have to wear a mask if they visit the nurse. And 3, if anyone is or does test positive and they have to have that quarantine for days 1 through 5, they can return on day 6 as long as they have improving symptoms. Days 6 through 10 of their return to school, they must wear a mask with the exception of when they are eating, drinking, or outside. So those are the 3 requirements of when masks must still be worn in school or on school provided transportation.
But if they come back after 5 days with a negative test, they still have to have a
If
mask?
they tested positive from either the date of exposure, the date of symptom onset, or the positive test, whatever it is that came first, that's their day 0, and then from there they start counting out 10 days. On day 6, if their symptoms are improving, they can return to school. They're likely not going to have a negative test because they'll be testing positive probably for a little while. But if the symptoms are improving, they can return. But on those days 6 through 10, they must still wear a mask. That's not an option.
Okay, thank you. All right.
Well,
Yes.
I agree with the superintendent. I think it's time to move on with this. In regards to the new policy, have all districts implemented a policy throughout this process, a base policy?
As far as I
guess
know,
my
every
little-
district has approved the versions of this EBCFA.
I guess my loaded question is, what if we don't have any policy? We can still require, buses still need to have it. We can still require the students. So what does a policy do? Is it for, if something happens, there's repercussions? At this point, I don't want any policy. I want all the policies off the books. I know there's still requirements on the buses. That's out of our control. But I don't think every district had a face mask policy throughout the last 2 years. From the little bit of research that I did, I would just like to see the whole policy go away and us be able to enforce, the policies on the bus because that's out of our control, and then in the health office for obvious reasons. So I would prefer that the whole policy just kind of goes away and we don't implement any policy. I think our students have been listening and doing a good job throughout this process. I don't see any reason why they wouldn't continue to do so. I don't think this policy made our students follow the rules. So that would be my wish would be that the whole policy just goes away. I think many of us have been waiting for this for some time. We've been following the rules of the state. So I think that's it. Unless I can understand clear cut why we do need policy, I think I would be in favor of removing it altogether.
Okay, and if you don't mind if I can speak, and then we'll move this way. While you're on that, I guess I'm from the same camp. I think once we understood that the governor was going to lift the order he gave to BOE to DESI to us, which was the mandate back in August of last year, was my understanding we were going to rescind that once he lifted it, which he did on February 9th. So once he lifted, rescind means that we're going to rescind means it never existed before. So that's how I take the word rescind as opposed to amend. So that, again, it's like it never existed. However, as much as I don't want to face mask policy or face covering policy, I do understand about the health office, and I understand about the Fed transportation on our school buses. I get that. But I do not see, and by the way, I should tell you that once February 9th came and we got the word, I was so happy. I felt like celebrating. I almost hate to say that, but it's been too long. In September of 2020 that our little ones have been with masks on. And it's time to see those beautiful faces and their smiles, because they're contagious. Their smiles are contagious, and we have to see their smiles. So I do not want to see, based on what we're allowed to do, which is rescind the policy, however, have the superintendent have wording where the health office and the bus transportation, I get that. But I don't want to see a mask covering policy at all. I never wanted to see one from 22 months ago. So I would agree with Mr. Gaudette as far as on the K-8 side. And we'll come with a recommendation later on after we hear from input, but it's time. Masks, and again, I got a C in high school and college in physical science. I got a C. So I'm far from making a determination on what masks can do and what they can't do. But there's no record out there saying that masks can prevent a pandemic from spreading. There's just nothing saying that. And now, going forward, we have to worry about the social and emotional needs of our children, especially our little ones, because our high school kids can handle it better, but our little ones can't. So now, we have to do some backtrack of helping them out, social and emotionally, because of their social skills that over the last couple of years have been deprived. So with that, I'll pass to you.
I want to thank Michael for his quick thinking. You know, as soon as I reached out and asked just to get put on the agenda tonight, Michael was right on board with me. And I have to agree with Chris. I'm not voting on any more mandates or whatever. You know, we're just going to change the wording, and then we have to meet again when the federal side decides to change it. And you know, I think the people that are making these rules and pumping these rules out are out to dinner, and they're not wearing masks, and they're living their lives, and they want us to vote to make a kid one kid in the class wear a mask because he was COVID positive. We might as well walk around and tell everybody he had COVID. And I think that's even worse. It's worse to make one kid wear a mask in a class. And if that was my kid, I just wouldn't send him, because I'm not going to make him walk around with a mask on. Well, the rest of his class doesn't have a mask on. His kids are, they're curious and they're asking, and it's just not a comfortable situation for anyone. And I think that this is poorly timed politically, and I think that I'm happy that it's happening, but I just think that the mask policy just needs to be buried, and you can send your policy just as we do with anything else, and it's a federal policy, and we can just let parents know that this is what we have to abide by right now. But as far as just going to keep, they're going to keep rolling the wheel at us and telling us, oh, you guys can vote, school committees can vote to decide if the kids are going to do this or do that. If they said it, and I guess we'll have to do it, and Mrs. Schoolnover can send a policy out to people, but, it's my opinion that this has to die tonight, and we need to move on.
Charlie.
Well, first, publicly, I'm a big supporter of masks, but with that being said, I do believe it's time to remove the masks and make it by choice. I do support the superintendent's decision. I actually believe that the policy should remain because of one reason. I don't know if the 6 to 10 days is something that's required by colleges and schools and the workplace, I just remembered for some odd reason, that was something that I heard early on, that after 5 days that they can go back to school or whatever the case may be, but they needed to remain masked. And I don't know if that's a federal CDC rule. You know, I have mixed emotions because I know CDC is still saying it's too early, but I do believe it's time to remove it. But I don't know if getting rid of them, you know, leaving the policy, one of the reasons why I'm for removing the masks is because the data is not there. But let's just say, God forbid, in April or March, the numbers spike up and, you know, and it's about masks. We may have to refer, or if the state decides to put a mask mandate again, we need to meet again and create something. So just to remove it right away, I don't know if that makes sense to me. I think, you know, we have the 3 requirements, you know, health. How do you enforce a rule? It's a policy. That is still a policy regarding getting rid of it or not getting rid of it. It's still a rule, you know, there's no backbone to that. You know, that's why we have policies, and right now those 3 items is still a policy. So that would be my recommendation, not to remove the policy, because I think we're rushing to judgment. We don't know. I personally hope we can remove it, but why remove it today? But just
One question I asked that. The 3 things you just said, is that the coming back after 5 days with a positive, the health and the transportation?
correct.
I agree with you on that, definitely. Now, whether that has to be called a mask policy, I don't know.
How do you enforce something that's not a policy?
Those are the only 3 things that should be on there.
But that's a policy.
That is
So
fine.
that's what I'm saying. Everything else I agree with the superintendent saying. It's just, and the only other 2 caveats that I would like to put in is, 1, if you are wearing a mask, like if I happened to be in this room and all of you didn't have a mask on, and if I was wearing a mask, don't bully me. Don't feel like, try to persuade me not to wear a mask, because I tell you, you know, it is, I'm going to be very honest with you. I went to Mrs. Sousa's campaign thing. I walked in, I was the only one wearing a mask. Then I went, had some dinner, I sat down, I ate, and when I left, you know, I stood up, and I know there's pictures of me on social media because some people haven't learned to grow up, but that's a whole other issue. But the thing is, I didn't have a mask on, but to be called out, oh, you didn't wear a mask, or, you know, no one should be persuaded, because you're going to still have students that are going to feel comfortable wearing a mask. So that would be my other caveat, no one be bullied, and I'm glad to see wait 1 second, let me finish. I'm glad to see our student rep is agreeing with me. And then the second thing is, use common sense. If you're not feeling well, stay home. You know, those are the things that I think about the mask policy, but I agree, let's end it. I know some schools are adding 2 weeks after February vacation, but there's no data that shows that it will be a spike. So I'm for removing it as of the February 28th or whatever it is.
Right.
But removing the policy without just because we don't want a policy, I think that's a bad move.
No, those 3 things do have to be on there. Here's the thing that we may differ with, and it's the language from MASC that segregates our children. I don't want anything that's going to look like we segregate our children. A face covering that covers the nose and mouth is strongly recommended to be worn by individuals who remain unvaccinated. Vaccinated or not should not be a measure whether you wear a mask or not. That's my point. It should not be a measurement whether you're vaccinated or not. If you include those, then you're segregating our children, which should not be done. And then it says individuals who are vaccinated are not required to wear a mask, what may do so outside. That language should not even be on there.
I'm fine with rewording that, like saying, hey, I think the policy should be as strong as this, just like the superintendent said in his letter. We strongly encourage you to wear a mask if you are not feeling well.
I want his letter
just
to
like
be the
that.
policy.
But that's fine, but not to remove the policy.
Right.
But right now, to rescind it, wearing the mask, I'm all for it. But
That went out February 9th to all the parents. The superintendent's letter notification that went on one call. To me, that's the policy I want.
Michael, so I have a question. A lot of other communities, school committees aren't even taking a vote on this because they've never had a mask policy to begin with. They've just always went by what the rule was. I don't know why we need to continue to have a mask policy if there's large cities and towns, larger than us, that to date never officially wrote a mask policy. Keeping a mask policy in place and saying that we might need it in 6 months, like, if we need it in 6 months, then it needs to be approached then. We can't just keep this lingering over
Funny you
everyone's
say that
head.
because Danvers School Committee met this week, and in Danvers, what they did was, the school committee didn't even take a vote. The chair of the school committee in Danvers said, there's no need to take a vote. The governor lifted the mandate, and as far as he's concerned, it's rescinded based on that, so.
And my only other thing was, you know, we talk about that we're gonna have to wear them in the health office and on the buses. I hope that they're available to kids, because now they're not gonna have them on readily, and they're not gonna have them with them. And I just wanna make sure that they have them there, but as far as keeping this lingering over everyone's heads, and you know, I understand that things could go backwards, but if that's the case, then we have to revisit this. We can't continue to alter the way that everybody's living, and the way that kids are, you know, hey, you're gonna take your masks off now, guys, and in a month, the numbers go back, and then, you know, you don't even know who's gonna be at this table, and they're gonna just go back and say, okay, the mask is back in place. And I think that we have
Before
to,
we go on to the region, anyone else? You all set?
I'm also.
Just Spencer.
Okay. On the region side?
I'll just say I'm in favor of the superintendent's recommendation and adopting the policy as recommended. May I ask a question?
Sure.
Mr. Schoonover, whose responsibility would it be to enforce the student who has to return to the mask for days 6 through 10? So to whom does that responsibility fall? Is that an honor system or based on a parent and a student? Is that a nurse? Is there for me? How do we know? And how, if it's a policy, how is it enforced and who enforces it?
So the school nurse would know when the original day is, and then, you know, from what day the count begins, what day they can return to school, and then what days 6 through 10 are. So she would the nurse would communicate that with students' teachers.
So if I'm a teacher and I'm in a classroom and I have a student in front of me who's back on day 7, is the expectation that the teacher would then A, have that information, and then B, say, you know, if the student removes their mask, you need to put your mask. Would that be the procedure?
It would.
So I guess I know.
And teachers have a supply of masks too for students who don't have them. So if they didn't have one, they would proceed.
So I'll just say I know I'm very much in the minority on this, but I'm actually I'm not in favor of, and I've thought about this a lot, but I'm actually not in favor of removing this policy at this point. I'm very encouraged by the numbers, the reduction in cases, the vaccination rate. I think things are very much moving in the right direction. What troubles me is that I'm looking at the link that was provided in the MASC policy, which sends us to the CDC, which still indicates that the CDC recommendation is that everyone over the age of 2 remain masked inside a public school, regardless of vaccination status. So we have a disconnect between what the CDC recommends and what the Mass Department of Public Health, DESE, and the governor recommend. Now, I'm not a public health expert, but I have a hard time reconciling that. And I know throughout this whole pandemic, we have received lots of mixed messages. And I think as a parent, it's been incredibly difficult it's like every day you have to make a new choice in sort of these impossible situations. I wear a mask all day at school. I don't like it. My kids wear masks. My son is in college and is required to be vaccinated and masked on his campus still. So for me, what it comes down to is that students are required to attend public school. It's compulsory. It's not an optional activity like going to the Celtics or going out for dinner or doing any of these other activities, which I will admit I've participated in with my family unmasked. So we go out for dinner and we sit down and we take them home. But for me, what I struggle with is I come back to the most vulnerable kids that we have to think about, the most vulnerable families. And their attendance in this building is required. And so I'm really encouraged by the numbers, but I'm nervous, that it's the Monday after vacation, and I hope lots of people are enjoying life and doing fun things. But that timing makes me nervous. The vaccination numbers are encouraging, but they're not at 80%. We still don't have a vaccine available to children under the age of 5. So I feel like we're getting there, but for me personally, I'm not there yet. That's just me, and I know that's not a popular position. But because school is not optional, for me, I feel like we err on the side of the most cautious for the most vulnerable. So that's just where I am. Thank you.
I support lifting the mask mandate at this time. Mr. Schoonover, do you feel that a policy is needed to ensure that we follow the federal regulations with the bus in the nurse's office and during those, days 6 to 10?
Well, as Mr. Machado said, without a policy, there's nothing to enforce. And that's the reason why the school committees approve policies. That's ultimately the school committee's decision to have a policy or not, but without one, there's no enforcement of any violations.
Thank you. I supported lifting the mask mandate in Berkeley K-8, and I'll do the same here.
Sorry, I couldn't hear that.
I said I supported lifting the mask mandate at the K-8 in Berkeley, and I support it here as well.
So eliminating the policy altogether or adopting
No, lifting the mask mandate if the superintendent feels that we need a policy in order to enforce these. I do appreciate and recognize other districts have done it, understood. If our administration felt we could do that here, I would support it, but if not, then I'll support adopting this policy with the minimal, potentially revising some of this language with minimal language to ensure that we're just covering the 3 federal regulations.
That's my case. We've been consistent in following the recommendation from the Massachusetts Department of Elementary and Secondary Education. There was an announcement last week of their policy to lift the mask mandate effective February 28th. Within just a couple of days, the Massachusetts Association of School Committees provided us with a revised policy with respect to mask wearing in schools, which I assume is consistent with the Secretary of Elementary and Secondary Education's guidelines. The superintendent has recommended it. I think in this situation, it's incumbent upon us to listen very carefully to the superintendent and barring extraordinary circumstances to follow his recommendation. There are very limited circumstances in this policy under which students would be expected to wear masks. I actually share Mr. Machado's concern about the bullying issue, both with respect to kids who do wear masks, kids who don't wear masks. And if this policy had come to the policy subcommittee, I would have recommended adding language that specifically discourages bullying, whatever the decision of the specific student is. But I think it's important that we implement this policy tonight. So my position would be that I favor adopting this newly recommended policy from the Massachusetts Association of School Committees as written with the provision as effective February 28th, which is also consistent with what I understand to be the governor and the Secretary of Elementary and Secondary Education position.
Okay, so I haven't said anything. I would wait till the end, but I share a lot of concerns that Sandy mentioned, and I'm more on the cautious side. I will tell you that I support the recommendation here from the superintendent in this revised policy for face coverings, and I will go step forward and say that I think this gives us to revisit this in the near future. Maybe at our next meeting to see if we've had any movement away from the good numbers we're seeing now with the implementation.
respected in the schools. The kids are very much done with masks. It's a constant reminder in the classroom, especially just kids are being constantly reminded to wear it over their nose. Even sometimes people are wearing it under their chin just to say they have a mask on. I think the students are done with the implementation of masks. However, I do think that there should be a policy in place because the only way that teachers are allowed to tell students to put their masks up is because there's a policy in place. And in regards to the bullying, I'm a member of ABC Anti-Bullying Coalition here at the school, and bullying is still prevalent in our schools, running from kindergarten up until 12th grade. I think kids can be cruel, and they can make sly comments to others like, why are you wearing a mask? That's stupid or something, but just having that word in there to say, like, it's strongly recommended, and no one should be questioning your choice to do that. I think that would be really beneficial for including the policy. And kind of from a student perspective, I think we can move past these masks, and if we have to wear them again, I think it's going to depend on the science, but we're not do it.
Superintendent, before we go to commentary, MIAA, is it still in effect with MIAA? Because I constantly see the basketball players on both sides with their mask down at their chin and their nose exposed. To me, that's okay with it, because I don't believe in wearing masks anyways. But are they being reprimanded by their coaches for wearing their masks that way?
I've been to some games this year where the referees will stop play, blow the whistle, and remind students to put their masks up properly. I've heard coaches tell their players to put their masks up properly. I've also seen it. I've seen a player go half a game with it, on their chin, more or less, with no one saying anything. So most students, and I was just watching the girls' basketball game tonight. All 10 players who were out there all had their masks on. They were wearing it the right way. The vast majority of them are still.
I mean, I'm constantly seeing pictures on the Sentinel where the fans and the players, their masks, I mean, why do you wear them? Which they shouldn't be anyways as far as I'm concerned, but if there was a mask policy, at least wear them properly. That's my point.
And when you, if you were to go watch a game, there are usually 8 or 9 players on the court who are wearing them just as I am right now. And then you'll see the 1 or 2 is either below the nose or below. But most of the kids are really doing a good job wearing the mask. And just the more general question about the MIAA, I don't know exactly how much longer they will also enforce masks indoors. Fortunately, this February 28th lines up at the end of the winter season, and there are very few indoor sports that take place in the spring. That's almost a Berkeley, we don't have any.
I think my point is that, we shouldn't even have anything at all. It creates friction, and that's not good. So I just feel bad for the players, the fans, but that's me saying that. So.
Michael, before you go to public input, because I'm sure that parents are probably going to ask this, what is even the policy if we're going to vote? I don't even know. We're going to add 3 things, but then there's something about...
Yeah, we're going to discuss it after conference.
Is it that one? That's my question.
Yeah, but there's some language in there I want to discuss.
Because that was what Michael was discussing.
Right, there's some language in there I want to discuss that when we move forward. I would ask if anybody wants to come forward, just state your name, the town where you live. Try to keep your comments to about 3 minutes if possible. And be respectful, and I would ask that you just go through both chairs. So, come forward.
Where would you like me to speak, Mike? Just anywhere?
Yeah, come on in. Come closer, yeah.
Hi, my name is Mike Kostnak. I live at 471 Fairway Drive. I have children in the 8th grade this year. I'm in strong support of removing these masks. I think it's long overdue. Should have been done a long time ago. That being said, we did have to comply with DESI. We have no choice but to follow mandates from the state or the federal government. That leads me into what Chris Cadet and Mr. McDonald suggested, and maybe even Ms. Garrett, if it's all back there. Why do we even need a policy in place if we are following the mandates of, let's say, higher up state, federal government? I understand we have to have, the kids still have to wear masks on the bus because it's part of federal transportation. But if we didn't have a policy, why would that not still be able to be enforced? If you get what I'm saying, like, why do we need a policy to, enforce a federal mandate? That would be one question I would have for Mr. Schoonover or someone on the board. And the same with like CDC guidelines. And I agree with the CDC guidelines, and I strongly agree with Mr. Schoonover's recommendation. I think it's a great recommendation. But I think Mr. Cadet's recommendation or question is why we even have a policy is even better. Because we do need to enforce federal law or federal guidelines. And I guess I'm just at a lack of misunderstanding, not being a lawyer, why we would need our own policy on a school committee level to enforce something that is mandated by the federal government. As far as protecting the most vulnerable, yes, COVID is a severe disease right now, but a lot of countries are starting to move to treat it as an endemic versus a pandemic, where they recognize it's going to be around for a while, and they need to get back to living, which is what these kids here in Somerset need to do. So what I was going to say is, there are vulnerable children who are vulnerable of things other than just COVID. A lot of kids have difficulty wearing the mask, and it leads to other things like depression. And when there was a remote learning isolation, I work in a building in Fall River, an office building, where next door, sometime during the pandemic, a mental health place opened up that treated specifically children. And that place is a revolving door from 9 o'clock in the morning till after I leave work. All day long, there's children going in there for social emotional needs. And talking with some of the counselors in general there, most of these kids are going there because of the isolation and depression they feel from the pandemic. And I think these masks are a symbol of the pandemic. That's another reason why it continues to go away. I could probably speak a little longer, but I will stop because I know there may be other people.
Thank you, Professor.
Thank you for hearing me.
Yeah, thank you. Anyone else?
Chairman McDonald, I just recently spoke at a school committee meeting at the K-8, but I didn't speak here, so Chairman Pensmaker, if you would allow me to just give some comments. I'm obviously in support of removing this policy altogether, and there are a couple of reasons behind that. First and foremost, when this policy was first adopted, and I consider myself someone who pays very close attention to what goes on in the school committee meetings, I did not understand the scope of this policy. I didn't understand its permanency. I didn't understand what it would mean for my children. I know and I understand more now, and I think that this policy has no place in our school department and involving our children. The second thing here is, my son had COVID, and he caught it at school during lunch. I know that because our family was isolated because of a close contact that my mother had working for the Fall River Public Schools. My son had lunch with someone, mask-free. That student tested positive on a Friday, and my son tested positive on a Monday. Your school is not following the guidelines in this packet or whatever this is, because if you were, whoever tested positive or 6 days after would have to go and eat lunch separately. They're not supposed to be sitting side by side, elbow to elbow. When my son came back from school, he sat right on the side of his friends without a mask and could potentially have given COVID to other classmates. So it's not even being enforced there. I did mention last time at this meeting, my son was given a detention by a teacher here at the high school because his mask was continuously below his nose. My son's a rule follower. He has absolutely no problems in school, has never received a detention, never been suspended, and he's great academically. He was embarrassed in front of his class and given a detention, which was swiftly taken away by your principal the minute I picked up the phone. And without any type of accusatory statement, I just asked, do we have any flexibility on this detention? To which she said, stay on the phone, I'm going to go in the system and remove it immediately. So by keeping a policy in place that you have absolutely no ability to enforce, you're going to create friction amongst your staff, who are obviously being usurped by the principal and removing these policies or these detentions. You have no ability to enforce them. And it's going to create a friction and an environment that is not going to be conducive to moving on and getting everybody like in a more positive mental state. The other piece is I have a student in the middle school and I have a student in the high school. If you change your policy and eliminate the wording, but K-8, it looks like they have 3 votes, they're going to move to abolish this. Now you're going to have conflict amongst families. So my son is going to have to go to the nurse's office with a mask, but his sister isn't. So I'm asking you to really just reconsider what keeping these pieces in place means. I know that you'll have the community support in the event that a pandemic breaks out again and we need to relook at this policy. And there's no reason you wouldn't be able to meet again should we need to. But if K-8 is going to be voting to abolish this policy, what does that mean for families that have students in both schools and your inability to enforce these pieces of the policy that you want to keep? Thanks.
Thank you, Mrs. Machado.
Mr. Chair, if I could just make one comment
Yes.
on something Mrs. Machado said. When a student goes to a health office, if the Somerset School Committee chooses to rescind the policy altogether, and someone needs to go visit the nurse, they will not be able to go into the nurse's office at all. If they don't have a mask. So it's not like we'd be allowing students to not
Right,
have a
this is
mask.
why
and
Mr.
to-
Machado brought to
Okay.
my point, some things that I would want worded in what would be called a.
And can I just follow up, because Mrs. Machado made a point at the last meeting, but unfortunately we didn't address it. How about the situation where a child comes back after 5 days and is able to eat with their classmates without a mask? Because obviously that may or may not have been a COVID transmission from that point. We really don't know, but it could have been. How do we avoid that from happening?
Mrs. Machado made a great point. It doesn't make sense, but the school department is following precisely the rules that the state had. I called the state to say it doesn't make sense that if they have to have strict mask adherence the entire time they're in the building, but yet we're going to put kids elbow to elbow in the cafeteria, they can take it off. And they just said, well, that's what it is. So we do not have to have a special eating location for students in that situation. The state said, just put them in your cafeteria with everyone else. It doesn't make sense, but that is the rule. We are not violating anything that the state is recommending.
Can I ask one further follow-up
Yes.
question? Because obviously this weighs on my decision. How about, I know this for a fact, there are peanut-free tables. Is that like if I was tested positive and I came 5 or 6 days, are we allowed to assign a seat, or is that putting a mask on a child because I'm just looking at it, I don't want, because at that point, I don't want other students to possibly face what Mrs. Machado's child went through. Because now, do we go what Mrs. Andrews saying, everyone's staying masked, but even then, that's not working either. So it's just really difficult, so.
And I just interject here, I promised, excuse me, Superintendent, I did promise comments from our stakeholders. So you have the floor.
Hi, my name is Monique Schofield. I'm not really a good public speaker, so I apologize if I step over my words. I live at 2687 Riverside, and I'm here as a parent. I know I've emailed a few of you, and I just have to express, there's some significant damage done. I have a daughter in grade school, and I have a son that's in middle school. And I cannot express to you enough that every single day, my daughter does not want to go to school and wants to be homeschooled. I have never been in a position like that. I mean, obviously COVID came out. I've also professionally been in a position where I've had to make policies. I've had to deal with COVID when everybody was, you know, we had no data or no information on it. I want to go with no policy, no more masks. We need to fix this for our kids, the community. Like, we have to work together. There is some significant damage that's there, and again, with bullying, I mean, I've seen it on the opposite side. Things are not a one-size-fits-all. I've also had to advocate for the most vulnerable population. I take care of individuals with developmental disabilities. I've been at places where they won't see my individuals because they won't wear a mask, yet they couldn't get the health care that they needed, places in our community. So, with that being said, I mean, we take recommendations. Myself as a parent will listen to people, the education that they received, I hear them out, and then I make the decision for my children. I really want to impress today that, please, let's just get back to letting the kids be kids and letting them be in school. I've seen the school buses, like, who's going to stop to mandate, like, who takes care of the kids wearing the masks? Is you have a bus driver. Not every bus has a monitor. I could see the children in the window. I don't know, just asking if there is that policy, just kind of echoing what somebody else asked, who would be, you know, making sure that that policy is being followed. If it is being on, if I'm hearing you correctly, it's on the transportation, in the health nurses station, and where was the other place?
It's for those students who tested positive, and upon their return to school, if they're still in that day 6 to 10, when they're supposed to have strict masks.
The other thing that I've learned professionally is data in, data out. We say that your nurses, right, would be the people that would be in charge as far as knowing who was positive and who needed to return to school. I've also dealt with COVID with my children on more than one occasion. A lot of times it's a one-day thing, and you don't even realize that you have COVID until you actually go get tested. So I can imagine that the numbers are like significantly different than what has been reported to the nurses or what we know about. I'm pretty sure that there have been a lot more people that have come to school and been in the environments that have not been captured anywhere. So anyway, that's all I have to say for today. Like I said, I'm not good at public speaking, but I really feel it's important to express that. Thank you.
Anyone else? Yep. Come on. What is your name?
Amy Castanet. So I got a nurse from in 6th grade. And what I'm confused about is how, like, some classes, like, teachers don't enforce wearing our masks, but in other classes they do. So I think that, like, that's the reason a lot of these kids don't know, like, when they should wear their masks. Because in some classes it's fine, some classes it's not. So, like, I think kids, like, have to go to the office, get detention because they're not wearing their masks. But then in other classes we don't, and I think that confuses kids because my last normal school year was when I was in 3rd grade, when I was like 8 to 9. So, like, you change a lot when you're from that age to 6th grade. So I think that just confuses these kids, and how some of these teachers who are enforcing the mask, they're not wearing their mask themselves. So I don't know how they should be able to enforce it if they're not wearing their mask. So,
Thank you, Ms. Patrick, for your comment. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Can I just read one part of the policy to make it clear? Because to me, it may be helpful. The way the policy reads, it's not mandating masks any longer. So face covering that covers the nose and mouth is strongly recommended to be worn by individuals who remain unvaccinated or otherwise immunocompromised in school buildings and on school grounds, even when social distance is observed. So it's strongly recommended this way. It's not requiring the students to wear a mask. And correct me if I have this wrong, And the only cases where a mask would be required are students and staff returning from 5 days quarantine following a positive COVID test, and the health officers. And the transportation. So I mean, we keep talking about, the comments keep coming through as required mask. It's very, in a small amount of cases that the mask is required. For the most part, the mask is gone unless you have students or parents that choose to have their children wear masks in school. It's strongly recommended, but that's what it is. It's not a mandate.
I'm just trying to make sure I understand. There are 17 cases.
There were 17 total last week between our 5 schools. So far, earlier today, between yesterday and today, we're up to 3. Last week at this time, we were at 11 or 12 by the week of Tuesday.
Any further comments from our stakeholders?
Steph Charette, 213 Bourne Ave. I just have a question for the chair or anyone that can answer this. Your current policy now, as it stands with the masks, how do you enforce that? So if a child continues to show up to the school without a mask on now, what is the punishment? Because I thought Desi said you can't discipline children that don't want to wear a mask. I'm just curious about.
So, first of all, I think Mr. McDonald said it earlier. We've had strong mask compliance. We've had few situations where there have to have been discipline. And I'm not aware of every single case that principals don't inform me every time something happens. But I've not heard of many situations where students have received a detention or anything else. The state actually did suggest that discipline be associated with non-compliance. Following, I think the guideline was following procedures or similar procedures in the student handbook or something to that effect. So DESE did say that discipline could or should be associated with non-compliance, but to follow a progressive discipline, progressive ladder, I guess, of discipline in doing so.
I just want to make a comment on the bullying. As far as that is concerned, I feel like Somerset has had a serious problem with bullying before masks were even introduced into this school district. And I can tell you right now, my daughter attends a school that masks have been optional since day one. There's been zero bullying regarding who's wearing a mask and who isn't.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was going to close comment period because there is a public input later on. Yeah, Mr. Charette.
Neil Charette, 213 Bourne Ave. So I only have one question. If we remove the mask mandates and a teacher goes against that ruling, what are you going to do about that? That's my question.
A principal will address it with the teacher. I mean, that can't.
And what's going to be the enforcement on that?
We'll deal with that as we will, just as when we were saying that non-compliance, we will deal with that on a case-by-case basis, not a set, a black and white system. Same thing would happen. I don't anticipate that to happen. In fact, I already have an email ready to go out to staff based on what my thoughts would be about tonight, and is going to address, as Mr. Pierce was saying earlier, zero tolerance for any type of bullying, as well as teachers not, just like we don't want them talking about their political beliefs with their students. I don't want them sharing their beliefs that saying, this mask policy is stupid. I'm so glad it's gone. And I can't believe that, we have to wear masks anymore. I don't want any kids to feel uncomfortable by the choices that they are making. So that's going to be my message to them.
Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
There's a good question here.
Yes, ma'am.
My name is Sherry Perry. I live in Berkeley. 15 Jerome Street. I have kids in Berkeley school system and a daughter at the high school. I think the mask policy is long overdue to be gone. I don't want the policy at all. My house has had high anxiety from wearing a mask more than the COVID. So I know there's a lot of people that they don't get bothered by wearing the mask. I personally do, I can't breathe in it. One of my kids do have a problem wearing one. We don't know the emotional toll it is taken on these kids. So I definitely think we should end the policy. I guess we have to have some kind of federal policy because that's just how things are. But at a local level, I do think we should end the policy. I think it's time. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I think we're ready to put something together to vote on. I had no idea about the three things there about the health office, the bus transportation, and the positive COVID with the 5 days. So I want to put something together that's going to satisfy those three things. And of course, masking should be optional. End of story. Well, whether you want to call it strongly recommend or optional, that's what I would want to start February 28th. I guess we'd have to call it some kind of face covering policy because we have to satisfy the Fed guidelines.
What is it going to say?
Well,
Is it what it says on there?
Mike, for purposes of discussion, I'll entertain a motion to eliminate the face covering policy, EBCFA.
Second.
okay. We got a motion by Mr. Gordette, second by Ms. Gary to remove the face mask policy, EBCFA. Discussion, Ms. Michelle.
Unfortunately, it's going to show that I'm going to vote no on this motion because I do believe we should at least seek a policy to address the three options. Reading this, there is nothing on this policy that contradicts everything that we're saying here. Strongly recommend does not mean you have to. We're recommending it. And if you don't like to say, according to public health experts, it's not saying that we're saying, we're just stating what public health experts are saying. But I'm unfortunately going to be voting no because I don't think, and it's going to look like I want people to wear masks forever. That's not the case. I'm clearly saying that I don't want this, I want children to make their decision if they would like to wear, or the staff. But I'm going to vote no because I feel very uncomfortable not having any policy that states those three items.
Okay. Mr. Braun?
Getting a refreshing, it's going to come down to me right now. I'm going to go with it. I'm going to go yes.
Yes, to remove the mask policy?
Yes.
Again, my idea behind it is the bus mandate is still a federal mandate, so it's still enforceable. As I mentioned, there's other districts that don't have any policy on the books, and I believe they're still enforcing their mask policies. Nothing should change. The bus will be enforced by the DOT mandate, no different than the state mandate. It should be the federal mandate. As far as the nurse's office, I think Mr. Stone just said that. There'll be, no children, whether there's a policy or not, there'll be no children allowed in the nurse's office without a mask on. I support that. That's fine. You're the leader of our district. I'm going to support you when you say this thing. I don't think we need that in a policy. I don't think we need the bus in a policy. I think we're taking the mask off the children 95% of the time, 99% of the time. The mask policy can go away. I don't think it changes the rules that are still in place. So.
Is it possible to refer to a communication superintendent? Again, I like your communication of February 9th that went out to 112 to the parents of both Somerset, Berkeley, and Somerset. And it states, basically, strongly recommending, and you bring light of the health office in transportation. that have to be a policy?
If the Somerset School Committee chooses to rescind the policy in its entirety, I'm going to take a chunk of this policy here and send that in a letter to families saying, these are when masks.
I'm satisfied with that. Just as long as our parents know, and that probably could become part of the student handbook. Until again, we don't know when the Fed might release their guidelines, so.
Michael,
Yes.
I mean, if this
So
policy.
can I just, I don't want to interfere, but can I understand you say you don't want a policy, which is the responsibility of the school committee to establish, but you're going to put it in the student handbook? On what premise? On what authority?
I'm just coming up with these ideas, Mr. Fish, that's all. I'm just thinking off the top of my head.
There's a lot of school committees that have never had a policy this whole time, and they've enforced it. I'm just gonna tell you, like, if you brought me a piece of paper that had those 3 things written on it, that's very different than what's written in this policy. This policy is redundant, and it says, a face covering that covers the nose and mouth is strongly recommended to be worn by individuals who remain unvaccinated or are otherwise immunocompromised in school buildings and on ground. So that's saying that it's optional. But then the next line says that individuals who are vaccinated are not required to wear a mask. It's the same thing.
But
It
they
doesn't,
do so if desired.
anybody can do it if desired.
Right.
But you're literally segregating vaccinated and unvaccinated. That's what this is. It's from the CDC, it's about vaccinated, it's about unvaccinated, and it just doesn't,
And it also says the following requirements. Those aren't requirements.
right.
Those 2 sentences in the paragraph is not a requirement.
It says, it says that these are requirements. They're not requirements. It's us telling you you can wear a mask or you can't wear a mask. So to me, this policy doesn't even really say, so the 3 bold points, okay, great. If that's what we have to do because they're making us do it, then we're going to follow by these 3 bold points. We're going to wear them in health offices. You know, the parents that are here and the parents that send us emails that are speaking and want to be heard and not have their kids masked are going to abide by that. Their kids in school, they need to go to the health office. The nurse is going to come out and say, put this mask on so you can come in the health office. On the bus, like he said, it's DOT, it's federal mandate. But when you look at this policy, it's not about those 3 things. It's about making it about unvaccinated and vaccinated and requirements, but they're not really requirements.
Okay,
And
can
we're gonna say it
I
in different ways.
say something? I'm ready for a vote. Okay, I'm ready for a vote. And could you reaffirm what your motion was?
I don't know if it's in the cleanest form, but I believe I have a motion and a second, is to eliminate the face covering policy EBCFA.
Okay, I'm going to want a roll call on this. You made the motion, you seconded it? Okay, roll call vote, Mr. Machado?
I'm going to vote no as stated.
Mr. Goa?
Yes.
Mr. Gaudet? Ms. Gary?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes, 4-1.
Okay, on the regional side, after discussion, does anyone have questions or want to entertain a motion? Mr.
I'll
Benson,
make a motion to accept face coverings policy filed as recommended by the superintendent and MASC. I guess it's policy EBCFA,
Motion to accept.
effective February 28th.
Second. Motion second. Any further discussion?
I have just a point of clarification. This, just torn between the mixed messages. This policy says that in accordance with guidelines and recommendations from the CDC, DESE, and DPH, if you look at the guidelines that the CDC provides, linked in the policy, it says, CDC recommends universal indoor masking by all students ages 2 years and older, staff, teachers, and visitors to K-12 schools regardless of vaccination status. So, the policy reads, it sounds like the CDC recommendation, that doesn't match up to me with what the CDC recommendation is. That's not even. You're looking at the CDC recommendation? It says one thing, the policy says something else. Which is why so many of us are frustrated and confused.
So what if I've heard all the discussions there on both sides. I mean, I think that there is
a necessity for having a policy so that there's a framework for us to be able to know what's going on. And I want to give, in the case of all that we do, there is a policy subcommittee, we create policies that can give that framework. I understand your point, Ms. Andrews, and this is how it was written for MASC. If we wanted to take that out, we could say, therefore, in accordance with guidance and recommendations by the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education, that would at least reflect reality. And it would at least be accurate, even if I disagree with it, it would at least be accurate. And I actually do, I've heard everybody's comments. I think Mr. Fessmaker has a good suggestion. Let's look at it again in a month or so, 2 months, and see what's going on. I'm very encouraged by the decline in the number of cases. And I mean, as adults out there, we go into places where we have to wear a mask, and sometimes we don't. And I think we do have to learn to live normally. And as much as we don't like it, to a certain degree, masks might come and go. And so I think that we're following what the federal, maybe not what the federal, but what DESE is recommending. I think that we've already seen the cases go down. If we take the number of cases right now, this is going to impact a small number of students right now. I also appreciate what our student representative has said, and I like the idea of revisiting this in a month, because I think that if we refer it to the policy subcommittee, I'd like to put something in there with respect to bullying, because I think that that's important too. But this is part of what we have to do. We know this as adults, and I think that we can role model having to do difficult things when it's required of us. And so I appreciate how it affects people differently, but I think that when we have to alter it on, we have to alter it on. And if we think about the fact that the school, as you said, Ms. Andrews, is a required place for students even who could be at risk, we have to be mindful of that whole thing. I think this is a compromise. It is based on perhaps not the most conservative approach, but it is somewhere in the middle. And I think that it is what the superintendent is also recommending. So I would be okay with amending it that way.
Mr. Chairman, I would move that we amend the pending motion to remove from the second paragraph, line 3, the language Center for Disease Control, CDC. And also the reference to the CDC guidelines under guidance statement, second 1, which says Center for Disease Control and has its website.
And I'm second amendment.
I'm sorry, I apologize, Mr. Pierce, I cannot hear a word you said, so can you, thank you.
I said I move to amend the pending motion to remove from paragraph 2, line 3, the reference to the Center for Disease Control, CDC, and also the reference to their guidelines in the guidance statements that follow the policy.
And I second that.
And you seconded? Okay. Can we go into discussion for a second?
Yeah.
This is something that I was going to offer to the K-8 because I understand there, but the motion was made and I just, I knew I was going to vote no. This policy today, the way it's written, I'm not a big fan of either. I also don't like to vote on something just to vote on something so we can revisit next week. Why did we vote on it if we weren't prepared for it? When I received this from Robin, I quickly looked at this and I also picked up the same thing about CDC, and I'm like, wait a minute, CDC is not recommending this. DESE is recommending it, Massachusetts Public Health is recommending it, but at this point, they're flip-flopping every 5 minutes, and I don't want to get into that situation of flip-flopping myself, because I'd like to set up a policy. What I'm looking at is what the superintendent sent to us, and what I was going to recommend is the whole first paragraph is great. Eliminate every single other paragraph and say, something like a face covering, covering the nose is strongly recommended for both vaccinated and unvaccinated students. students must wear a mask for the following 3 reasons, period. It should be that simple. I don't think we should be going any further about CDC, mask, because, you know, they're gonna change their idea, because next week, DESI may change their policy, and guess what? It's no longer a true thing, but right now, it should really be focusing on how we agree, and that's really should be just the first sentence. We strongly recommend, just like the superintendent said, everybody said that they like that letter. I think it's fine. I strongly recommend people, but I can tell you, I know my child's not gonna be wearing a mask because she tells me that. But it shouldn't be strongly recommended for vaccinated or unvaccinated students, should be both, because that's what we really should be saying. But students must wear a mask for the following 3 reasons. I think it should be that simple. Keep it simple. Everyone understands. I am also concerned with our K-8 level by us, the way you guys voted, because just like the parent says, we have now 2 different policies in 2 different departments. I think it's an epic fail, because we should, that's why we did it as a joint meeting. So, but anyways, that's what I would recommend. Keep it simple for the superintendent. We should have a policy, and it still hits everything that we want, and then you revisit when any of those things change.
Mr. Machado, to your point, that's why I'll be voting no on it, because I wanted to match the K-8 policy. And I do support no masks. I also want to remind everybody, and Mike's going to remember me advocating for this at the MASC conference. Looking at our numbers here, are fully vaccinated, 77% Somerset, 68 Berkeley. We're right there at 70% at the high school level. We're close enough to it. Where in previous pandemics, it was 70% that was considered vaccinated for the population, not 80. I know that 80% number came out, but even when the pandemic first started, they said 70% was the goal, not 80. 80 came, nobody from DESI was able to tell me why it was 80%. Nobody from, I have not found an answer where that 80% came from. The number's 7. I think we need to keep that.
I would like to move, vote on the impending amendment, please.
We should just cut over to the version you have.
There's my amendment, I think that's pending on the floor.
So you move the question? Okay. The motion is second to move the question. All in favor?
No.
No?
To move the question?
So, what's the one?
I voted yes to move the question. I mean, I think it's spoken about.
Okay. I vote yes.
Yes? Move the question? Okay.
Yes. So we're not voting, you're just asking.
Moving, yes, we're going to vote.
The motion forward. Yes. Okay, so then, yes, I vote that, I'll say move the motion forward.
Okay.
I'll move the motion forward.
Okay. The amendment is to remove the reference to CDC.
So that's it, just remove the reference to CDC and use those areas to
Paragraph 2, line 3.
And the motion forward.
The reference to guidance statements.
All right, so now we'll vote on the amendment. So, can I vote on it?
I vote in favor of the amendment as presented.
Okay, Mr. Pierce?
Yes.
Ms. Andrews?
No.
No?
No.
No?
No.
So I move the question as to whether we adopt policy based on the motion of Mrs. Gagliardi.
Who seconded?
Second, I second it.
You seconded? Okay.
No, who seconded your motion, Julie? I'm sorry.
I did.
Oh, okay, very good, thank you.
So the motion is second.
Now,
To go back to the original policy proposed by
right.
We're amending our existing
You're right.
policy to adopt the language suggested by the SBA.
Mr. Boyd, Pierce, yes?
Yes.
Yes.
Ms. Andrews?
No.
Ms. Vincent?
No.
No?
No.
And, the chair votes yes.
Well,
Mr. Chair, I'd like to make a motion on the following, to adopt the policy of everything that remains in that first sentence, in that first paragraph, remove everything from according to notice. Then a face covering that covers the nose and mouth is strongly recommended to be worn by individuals regardless of vaccination status, and also that students will be required to wear a mask for the following 3 reasons. That's in bold lettering, and that would be my motion.
Are you taking out the reference to CDC, Mr. Machado?
CDC, Secretary of Education,
The whole
everything.
first paragraph.
The whole paragraph.
All the guidance statements?
Yep, because obviously that's going to, at that point, I don't think they contradict each other, so I don't want to support each other. So I'm just saying, I'm going based on what the superintendent said with his letter that we strongly recommend, but it's not required. And unless you're doing unless you're in the 3 items. I think we need to put some type of policy that covers those 3 items, and if not, then we need to vote to eliminate the policy, because right now we do have a policy in place that says you have to wear a mask.
I'll second that. So it says that, I can try to read it.
Can you write it down, please?
You want me to write it down?
Yeah. The superintendent has to enforce it, so can you write it down? Robin, can you?
Can we change it right on here? We would essentially say the Somerset Berkeley Regional School District is committed to providing a safe environment in schools during the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic. Maintaining a safe environment is critical to the district's ability to ensure students remain in a full-time classroom learning environment. A face covering that covers the nose and mouth is strongly recommended to be worn by individuals regardless of their vaccination status, while in school buildings and on school grounds, even when social distancing is observed. The following requirements will also remain in place beginning February 28th, correct me if I'm okay, until further notice. Vote number 1, students and staff returning from a 5-day quarantine following a positive COVID test must follow strict mask use other than when eating, drinking, or outside, and conduct active monitoring for symptoms through day 10 of exposure. Bullet number 2, masks will be required in all school health offices. Bullet number 3, a federal public health order. By federal public health order, all students and staff are required to wear a mask on school buses. Mr. Machado, does that sound correct to you, based on what you just said?
No. All right.
Yeah. He was making that correction.
I have the exact wording. The Somerset Berkeley Regional School District is committed to provide a safe environment in schools during the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic. Maintaining a safe environment is critical to the district's ability to ensure students remain in a full-time classroom environment. A face covering that covers the nose and mouth is strongly recommended to be worn by individuals regardless of vaccination status. Students shall wear a mask for the following items. Students and staff returning, students and staff shall wear a mask for the following items. Yes. Talk about game time decision.
Shall be required.
Shall be required? Yep, thank you. Shall be required to wear a mask for the following students and staff returning from a 5-day quarantine following a positive COVID test must follow the strict mask use. Other than eating, drinking, or outside, and conduct active monitoring symptoms, blah, blah, blah. Masks will be required in all school health offices. By federal public health, all students and staff are required to wear a mask on school buses.
So everyone's clear on what the amendment is? Okay, so the motion second on that. Any further discussion? Hearing none. Pierce?
Aye.
Ms. Gale?
Aye.
Ms. Andrews?
Aye.
Ms. Benson?
No.
Aye.
No.
Chair votes aye. Two noes. All right.
Okay, Chair, with your permission, the comment period during the policy was separate from public input, so if I could go back out and public input time for anyone that might have a comment, and just stakeholders, I please ask, bear in mind, we still have some unfinished business here, and the region still has their business meeting, but if anyone wants to make a few comments, feel free. It's public input.
Is it now or at the end of the meeting?
No?
Yeah, we have public input at the end of the meeting.
Oh, right there?
It's on there.
Does anyone have any comments
I would
besides?
just quickly like to thank especially the K-8 committee for taking the vote to remove the mask for the children and get rid of the mask policy. I think you've made a lot of the children in this town happy. And I thank you for your courage in doing so. That's it.
Thank you, Mr. President. I just want to say on behalf of both boards, there's no doubt in my mind, this is just a difficult thing to deliberate on. So thank you. Anyone else? Okay, public input, finished right now. New business, superintendent's evidence for school committee evaluation.
All right, thank you. Some information was shared with you, I think on Friday of last week from Robin regarding the 5 goals. Just some evidence. I hope that for those of you who've been on the committee for some time, I know you're used to that, but for those people who haven't done it before, I hope that light binder worked okay for you. So in there, just to help you navigate through it, one of the tabs did contain information just for the evaluation rubric, and then or the evaluation instrument, as well as the rubric that focuses just on the focus indicators. Those indicators that are aligned from the 4 standards to the 5 individual goals. So the first one, professional practice, this was on principal supervision, focused on that. And just, I think I put the information in there, but just for background purposes, this goal really stemmed from the 2019-2020 school year, at which time there were a few balls dropped, I'd say, regarding educator evaluation. Which put a little bit more demand on our principals the following school year. And so also in the 2020, 2021 school year, we had 2 new principals. 2 of those principals rose from the assistant principal rank, so we actually had 3 new assistant principals in that same school year. So we had really, I guess, 3 new faces in different roles. And, so there was really that other need to focus on principal supervision. So the evidence that I included in there were a number of, or several agendas from leadership meetings, information about just me meeting with the principals to establish their own professional goals and school improvement and student learning goals. But as you go through that evidence, hopefully you can see the emphasis that we had throughout the year. This was really the system. It was not just for the calendar year 2021, but it really started in, I think the last full evaluation was in March of 2020, right around the time that COVID happened. So it was really for about a year and a half or so of a school year, 1.5 school years. But when you look at that, you'll see the focus on the educator evaluation system, and just on some of the things that we continue to work on as leadership team learning walks. creating a vision of the graduate and the resulting school and district improvement plans. So that's the evidence that you see there for professional practice. There were 2 student learning goals, the first of which addressed diversity, equity, inclusion, DEI, and some of the highlights there, the participation not just from me, but from the leadership team in a few different programs through the Harvard Graduate School of Education. The first being a course that we took together called Schooling for Critical Consciousness, and then this past year from, I think it started in March and ended in November of 21. It was Reimagining Education, Diverse and Equitable Schools, otherwise known as RIDES. And that was a virtual learning network, Somerset and Somerset Berkeley, together as a district. We participated with about 5 or 6 other either schools or districts from around the country in sessions. We had a session about every month. I think it was either February or March of 21 throughout the rest of that school year, and then we picked up in the fall, finishing in November. And just the collaboration that we had with other districts was, we had some wonderful conversations with these educators from around the country. We had some work to do as our own DEI team in between those sessions. And the team consisted of myself, Ms. Haskell, Mrs. Takudo, Dr. Camara, Dr. Manchester, a couple of teachers, and parents. So we had a lot of rich discussions, and this group is continuing to meet. We have some more work that we have to do, but the work that we did last year really laid the foundation for other things. One of the pieces of evidence there also is the Cultural Proficiency Plan, which is part of the District Wellness Plan. You'll see the connection from that. A lot of that work stemmed from the work that we were doing as a team in that RISE project. In terms of the I in DEI, building the inclusive culture within our schools, just a few months ago, we were fortunate to have some students here from the high school. We were celebrating them, and we heard from them, from parents, just about how strong the inclusive culture is here at Somerset Berkeley. And we're focusing on classroom improvement, really focusing on the co-teaching model, offering teachers PD and coaching. That's been ongoing now for the past year or so, with some very good success, and we're going to continue to expand on that training in 2022. At the middle school, they're following the same program that we have at the high school, introducing unified sports. We have a unified bocce team, unified basketball starting any day. So we're continuing to build that inclusive culture in the school systems. The evidence that you'll find for the next goal, student learning goal 2, so social emotional learning. One of the pieces there is also the wellness plan. You'll see there a plan for each of the grade spans, K to 5, or I think it was actually pre-K to 5, 6 to 8, 9 to 12. You'll see the steps that were created to address social emotional learning. And some of the things that have been implemented so far is that DESA screening, DESSA, the Devereaux Student Strengths Assessment. It's a way for teachers to screen students for social emotional learning competence and resiliency. There are 8 competencies that are addressed that you can find there, and they're all aligned with the CASEL framework. So I embedded some information there so you can make those connections. We started a curriculum review. One of the things that we'd like to do is to focus on really a more formal SEL approach in the form of resources for teachers, for students. So we've undergone, we've started to do that. There were 3 programs that I identified there that we're currently looking at, but it's not limited to just those 3. I shared with you some numbers about responsive classroom. Obviously, that's been going on for several years, but we, over this cycle, we started at the elementary level, expanded to the middle school, and we've now introduced it at the high school. I shared the numbers there. We have 44 elementary teachers who have gone through the core program, and another 35 who have completed the advanced course in responsive classroom. 72 members of the middle school have participated in that. That's essentially, it's near 100% of the faculty at the middle school that has gone through that process. And we currently have 18 individuals at Somerset Berkeley who have gone through the initial responsive classroom training. And responsive classroom is a social-emotional learning approach that's based on, it's all research-based instructional strategies. We've added 1.6 FTEs within the Somerset Public Schools last year in school adjustment counselors. Every elementary school now has a full-time adjustment counselor, and we now have 2 at the middle school, so we took a part-time position and made it full-time this past year. And as the Somerset Berkeley Committee knows, it's not what's happening in 2021, but continuing to expand that. And there's currently a position in the Somerset Berkeley budget for the expansion of another adjustment counselor to address needs here at the high school. In 2021, the 2 districts received the Social Emotional Learning and Service Learning Grant. We have participation, we have 14 teachers from the Somerset Public Schools participating in the cohort, 9 from the high school. So there's some information about that program there. And then it was, afterwards I went back and I realized one of the big changes that we had this year was the addition of our comfort dog at the Somerset Public School. And if you haven't seen the students, the way that they attach themselves to this dog and what Raider has done for students. I witnessed firsthand a student having a meltdown, an elementary student having a meltdown in the hallway, and seeing the connection between the dog and the student and the immediate effect that it had on that student, it was unreal. And that was something that I had been looking at for a while. I talked with about a few people, and when Officer Haig came to me saying, hey, I've got this chance to get a comfort dog. So we worked together, and very thankful for Officer Haig to be the dog's handler and for everything he's done. So that has had a nice impact on our students regarding social emotional learning. Let's see. All right, then 2 district improvement goals. The first is strategic planning. I put in there the draft plan and the action steps. This includes revision of the graduate work. And just showing, and we've talked about this before, but also just showing how that high school vision of the graduate has translated to the elementary school. So I put a couple of pieces of evidence there, just from South Elementary to North Elementary, showing how that vision of the graduate is reflected at our lower level schools as well. It's still, unfortunately, this was one of those things that got sidetracked because of what we've been through for the last year and a half. In fact, we had a big event scheduled for the first Saturday in December, and due to the spike that we were getting right after Christmas and the New Year, I had a number of people who were on that committee who were just saying that they were back, they didn't want to participate, so we had to postpone that, and so it still needs to be rescheduled. And things like that have happened a few times along the way. We continue to get work done. It's not complete, obviously. It has not been presented to the school committees yet, but hopefully you can see from the evidence there that much work has been done. It just needs that final few pieces, steps to be complete. The second improvement goal is on communication. So I gave a number of different examples of communications to families regarding COVID and reopening schools, family newsletters, examples of social media, the MSBA building project, and all the communication that took place last year with that, and trying to get parent feedback with several surveys that were done over the span of these over that goal being created. And then with that, as I said at the beginning, the 4 standards for leadership. So standard 1 is instructional leadership, 2 management and operations, standard 3 is family and community engagement, and standard 4 is professional culture. The indicators within those 4 standards all have to be aligned to the goals. So that's why there are limited, there are a few standards or indicators from each standard. Those are connected to those goals. So when you're looking at the tabs there, chances are, the evidence that you need for those is some of it might be there, some of it might be back under one of the 5 goals. So I think that's kind of runs through the information that I shared with you. I don't know if you have any questions regarding some of the things that I put in there, or any questions that you have at this time.
I got a question for Julie in a second. Does anybody have any questions on that?
I don't have any questions. I haven't gone through it in all detail yet, but thank you for putting it together. Is there a date for the next?
Well, that was going to be
Oh,
my
sorry.
question. We have to comprise this evidence, correct, and put it on the evaluation tool?
Right, I think we've all got the evaluation tool and sent to us at the last meeting, but maybe we can send it out again.
Okay.
And so I typically will take that tool and review the binder again and kind of make my comments and fill it out, and then we will forward that over to Rob. I think the goal, I don't have it in front of me, I think the goal was to try to give ourselves, I think we have agreed to, but the committee can decide to do something else. I think we had agreed to give ourselves about a week to look at that and get that over to Robin so that then we would be able to compile it. And I don't know if we have another joint meeting set up yet, but the idea would be that our subsequent joint meeting, we have a public kind of discussion over what those evaluation, the accumulation of that is about. Does that make sense to everybody? I think that's what we talked about.
I think that's a good idea. I didn't want to do that on Zoom, so I wanted to do it live, so maybe we could schedule something towards mid to late March.
Right, we're going to be fine. Do we have anything before that? I don't think. No. So it's not for our next meeting towards this, when our next, one of our meetings.
Yeah, that would be the only agenda item for K-8, so.
Yeah.
And we did have, we were planning, previous to Commissioner Riley's announcement last week, Ms. Haskell was going to share it with both committees tonight, the wellness plan.
Okay.
So we sidelined that, knowing that this first part of the meeting was going to take a little bit longer than expected. So there is that item too that needs to be addressed in the 2 committees.
Just a clarification, we asked him to complete the evaluation to, by the week from today, so
Yeah.
on the 22nd. Yeah.
And we're not going to meet until March. I think maybe we finish that, go through all that material and complete the evaluation in 1 week. Is unnecessarily brief from my perspective.
We just have to make sure that we're all making time to put it all together as well. So I'm not sure of the date, so we'll give Robin some time and.
Well, do you think we could fit us in at the next business meeting of March meeting?
When is our March?
March 22nd.
I think that's the public hearing.
Yeah, the last 2 meetings for them have gone a little late probably because of our joint meetings, but I'd be happy to, if they want to come to ours or we can do it here.
Right.
Swap it up a
Next
little
one
bit.
is, what are we, the 14th?
You guys are doing 11 p.m.
We're the 14th.
But I think we have a public hearing too, no? Was that the 14th? Yeah. We have the budget here.
Oh, we have that, too.
So let's set out a date, and then with that in mind, we'll kind of divide up the time between us completing it and Robin. Is that reasonable?
Yeah.
I mean, not the date.
Yeah, just the school vacation, I'll need more than just.
Sure, that makes sense. Julie and I will do us.
I'll do our best.
Like, yeah. Is that all right with everyone? We'll check out the dates,
Yeah, I think
determine
that's
it, and
great.
split the.
And we can get it to her before the end of the.
Date to start.
Yeah, if I could, just some brief things. First, about the dog. I know the dog is mostly for K-8, but sometimes Ray does come visit us at the high school, and personally, it just lightens up the mood in the classroom that he walks by, like, oh my gosh, it's a dog sighting. So honestly, if we could have one at the high school, I would really do it. But I think if I could just put out there that he has a possibility of having one at the high school, that would be amazing because he does just brighten everyone's day. Even on the Instagram that he has, like, it's amazing. So that's it brightens up my day. And then adding a adjustment counselor, you could say, that's a great idea. I, for one, have taken advantage of all the resources provided at the high school, and with her son with dyslexia, she has helped me and so many other students, and it's a difficult job because they deal with so many kids here. I think adding another one would be so beneficial because it lightens their load and makes it able to help more students, which I think is great.
Thank you for that.
So we all set now?
Okay, I will,
Is the student representative who just stay for your entire meeting? Or, I'd like to hear her report, even though it's not on our agenda, and I would like to see her get out of here at a reasonable time, even though we probably still have a little bit of time ahead of us.
I agree with
So
that.
I'd be happy to hear her
Oh, no,
report.
I was going to stay.
I know that's not on our agenda, not on your agenda, but.
Well, we're not leaving right away after executive session. So,
I know,
Okay.
but
They say to do it.
I would rather her not leave here at 10:30 after giving her report, so, and I would like to hear the report.
I'm used to getting
I
done at
enjoy being a
12.
part of the discussion.
But we'll be leaving at 11 or 11:30.
What's that?
I said, you won't be leaving here at 10:30, but we'll be leaving about 11:30, the way this has gone tonight.
Oh, yeah, I agree. We voted pretty quick on our thing, so that's all right. I understand that. That's why I was hoping that the two representatives could give her a report if she could. But that's up to her. And you guys.
Yeah, no, I think that she will probably be here most of the
Good point. Good point. Okay, I will entertain a motion on behalf of the Somerset School Committee pursuant to Mass General Law, Chapter 38, Section 21A2, to conduct strategy and preparation for negotiations with non-union personnel, or to conduct collective bargaining sessions or contract negotiations with non-union personnel. Director of Business and Finance, Ron Taro, Director of Special Education, Megan Acton. Pursuant to the Massachusetts General Laws, Chapter 38, Section 21A-7, to comply with or act under the authority of any general or special law or federal aid or federal granting aid required. 2021 joint executive session minutes, and the committee will return in open session. That's a motion.
Second.
Motion made by Ms. Gary,
Oh,
second by
sorry.
Mr. Gordette. Roll call vote, Mr. Shadow.
Aye.
Mr. Gore.
Aye.
Mr. Gordette.
Aye.
Ms. Gary.
Aye.
And the chair votes aye.
I entertain motion on behalf of the Somerset Berkeley Regional School Committee pursuant to Massachusetts General Laws, Chapter 38, Section 21A2, to conduct strategy and preparation for negotiations with non-union personnel, or to conduct collective bargaining sessions or contract negotiations with non-union personnel. Director of Business and Finance, Ron Taro, Director of Special Education, Reimagining, pursuant to Mass General Laws, Chapter 38, Section 21A7, to comply with or act under the authority of any general, special law, or federal grant and aid requirements. 2021 joint executive session.
So moved.
And the committee will return to open session.
Second.
Motion is second. Mr. Spears?
Aye.
Mr.
Aye.
Sanders?
Aye.
Ms. Vincent?
Aye.
Ms. Cleary?
Aye.
Missed it, just missed it.
Oh, sorry.
You sit on that side.
Mr. Goff.
Aye.
Somerset School Committee to approve the release of 2021 joint executive session minutes of May 24th, where there are no redactions, but June 15th, August 25th, November 9th, and November 30th, there are redactions.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, motion made by Ms. Gary, second by Mr. Machado. Any discussion? No discussion, roll call vote, Mr. Machado?
Aye.
Mr. Gore?
Aye.
Mr. Gordette?
Aye.
Mr. Gary?
Aye.
The chair, I vote McDonald, votes aye. So with that noted, I will entertain a motion on behalf of K-8 to adjourn our joint meeting with the region.
So moved. Second. Nope.
Okay, good vote.
Motion made by Ms. Gary, second by Mr. Rodette. Roll call vote, Mr. Machado?
Aye.
Mr. Gore?
Aye.
Mr. Gordette?
Aye.
Ms. Gary?
Aye.
And Mike McDonald, chair votes aye. Thank you.